Hello, today I'm going to talk to you about another collection item here in Fraserburgh. Today I'll be talking about this book here. It's the account of the Bell Rock Lighthouse by Robert Stevenson. The book itself, it wouldn't really be described as being a very rare book. It's certainly scarce, but this one in particular is fairly special due to its connections to one of Robert Stevenson's friends, but we'll talk about that a little bit later on. Just a general history of the book. The book itself is really the Stevenson account of the building, and I emphasise that because today it's a little bit controversial. The book itself was published in 1824 by Robert and the Northern Lighthouse Board, and the reason it's so controversial, it basically stakes his claim to be the engineer and the builder of the structure. The reason that's a bit controversial, I'm sure many are aware, the actual chief engineer of the project was John Rennie. Now John Rennie, he died in 1821, and there's evidence to suggest that Robert Stevenson redrafted his book after John Rennie's death to remove even more references to that eminent engineer. So the reason that this book in particular is important to us is because of who it belonged to and where it came from. So this book was presented to Lord Eldon in 1824 by the Commissioners of Northern Lighthouses. Now, many people won't have heard of Lord Eldon. He was certainly a well-known figure in his day in Edinburgh. He was a lawyer down there, but he was a personal friend to Robert Stevenson. He was actually quite important to the Bell Rock story, even though he doesn't get much of a mention, because if you think back to before the building of the lighthouse, Robert Stevenson wasn't considered to be a very important or eminent engineer himself. As a matter of fact, many people doubted his abilities to actually build such a thing as the Bell Rock. Lord Eldon was not one of those people, and he gave Robert Stevenson much encouragement. Lord Eldon himself, he was a personal friend of John Smeaton. He'd met him a few times at least. And through this connection with Smeaton, he was able to encourage Stevenson not to take any note of what his doubters were saying. So essentially what Lord Eldon was telling Stevenson is experience doesn't really matter on this occasion. No one has any experience of building something like the Bell Rock except for Smeaton himself. So what's really important is you have the drive and the ambition behind you, and so long as you follow Smeaton's plan of his lighthouse, the Bell Rock will be built. So that was encouragement enough for Stevenson to continue with his plans. So we do actually have quite a lot of provenance for this particular item. We know, for example, that Lord Eldon had kept the book until his death in 1832, and the previous year it was then sold with his estate. So in January 1833, it takes 10 days to sell his entire library. This book in front of us here today, that was sold on the 9th day of the auction, and it sold for £6 and I think it was 10 shillings. So quite a lot of money back then. We believe it was purchased by the Duke of Buccleuch. It was certainly in his estate because we know that he donated it back to the Commissioners in 1920. This particular version has sadly been rebound. It was rebound in 1956. And it was then donated to our museum collection here in 2005. So it's fantastic to have a book. We know where it came from, we knew who it belonged to, and to have such a personal connection to Robert Stevenson and his friends is a fantastic thing to have for a fairly scarce book anyway. So that's the reason we've chosen this book, due to that magnificent history of a magnificent lighthouse and the magnificent people that were involved in it.